Morning. This is David Rizzo with Rogers Gardens, and today we're going to talk about what to plant, what to do in August. So it's really feeling more like summer. We are still getting some cool nights, but the days have been warm. We've been high humidity with some of the tropical storms down in Mexico, but we're starting to get hot. And everybody thinks it's sort of like the doldrums of summer, but you can still plant a lot. You have to make sure your watering's up, and some cities might have to be backing off on water. So I'm going to talk about, what we're doing in August, what we're planting. I'll talk about pollinators. I'm going to talk a little bit more about watering because right now it's hotter, and mulching and some other little things. So let's get started. So right now I'm really going to go into what I'm planting in the vegetable garden. And so planting right now in the veggie garden, I'm still putting in the heat levers, all the summer stuff. So let's let's head into that. So right now, I'm still doing all my peppers. So these are serranos. Hot peppers love the heat. So the hotter it is, the better they flower, the better they set, the better they grow. So this is your serrano pepper. This is the one that we use mostly for salsas, and it can get tall, 2 to 3 feet tall. The main thing with peppers, you really want to feed them good. So I'll fertilize them when I plant. I'll make sure they get enough water. If it's really hot where they're at, I will mulch. Mulching is important this time of year. And my favorite fertilizer I love for the vegetables. I use it on everything that fruits the all-purpose. So the reason why I like the down-to-earth all-purpose is because it's a high calcium fertilizer. So when you look at the back, I'll turn around. When you look at the box or the back of the box, this has 10% calcium, and that's usually from fish bone meal. That's what you want for good fruit development. So anything that's fruiting in summer, use a high calcium fertilizer. So your serranos you can do. What do we got? We got the shishitos. Shishitos are a mild pepper, a frying pepper. You can use those. Those are good. This is Lesnia, which is one of the newer peppers. It's close to like a Romanian pepper, but this really has a smoky flavor. Good pepper. But you can do any of the peppers. You might have a harder time finding some of the varieties in the nurseries right now, but you could do cayenne and ancho poblanos, and all bell peppers might be harder to find. But usually during the heat, I go the hatch peppers, the Anaheims, but Anaheim peppers are my favorite chili pepper for coastal areas. Hatch peppers usually like more heat. When I lived in Las Vegas, grew hatch fine. Near the coast, sometimes you might have trouble because we get cooler at night. So that's important with peppers. But feed them good, water them good, keep them fertilized. And in a container, I'll usually feed them about every 4 weeks, about once a month. In the ground, I'll feed them about every 2 months. But I always like to fertilize when I do start them off. I always use a handful. Everybody's like, how much should I use? How much should I use? I use one handful, I throw it. But I always plant stuff first. That's the thing with me is I don't wait until before. I used to always fertilize before I plant. Now I plant, I put a handful around it, I work it in the soil 1 inch to 2 inches down, and I water really good. So that's how when I'm fertilizing. Tomatoes, I'm still doing tomatoes right now. But the only thing right now with tomatoes, you're not doing in your late varieties. So that's a big difference from earlier in spring, later. So right now, if I'm planting any tomatoes, they got to be 75 days or earlier. That's why I'll do the heirlooms in April, May, because they take longer, 85, 90 days. So a lot of people say, oh, it's too late to plant tomatoes. Yes and no. It's too late to plant some of the heirlooms that are really late. It's still good. Like you could do the cherries, like the yellow pear and the sun golds, all these 60 to 65 day varieties. And sometimes a lot of people knock some of the other varieties. Like I'll still do celebrities right now, 70 days. Fast variety, it's going to give me a good salsa tomato. Better boy, it's a good all-around slicer. You're not going to see as many like any of the heirlooms because most of them are very late varieties, but you can do cherries, you can even do San Marzanos, your sauce tomatoes. So put them in, get them going, water them in good. If it gets really hot, mulch. That's my main thing. Mulch, mulch, mulch when we get hot. But sometimes I will wait 2 weeks before I mulch. I'll put stuff in the ground, I'll get it watered in, and then I'll mulch 2 weeks out, okay? Okay, moving on, you can do beans right now. Like they brought in some edamames, and sometimes edamames like a little bit of cooler weather. So edamames I might put in more shade. I don't know if I'll put them in full sun. Other beans, you can do like the French filet beans and all those. I don't really have a lot of the filet beans right now, but I do like the little bush one, like Ferrari. That's a good one. I'll do it by seeds. Seeds take 8 to 10 days to germinate, to come up. So if you don't see some things like the melons and the cantaloupe and the zucchinis, you don't see the plants, do the seeds. They germinate really quick. Moving on from the beans, like the pumpkins, you can still do pumpkins. But pumpkins right now, I'm not doing a lot of the late varieties. So we're already into August, so like really big pumpkins like the Dill's Atlantic Giant, I won't do those, but I'll still do like the little Jack B. Littles. That's a good one. They're going to vine around. I really have a lot of seeds. Let me see what seeds I grabbed. Let's see, because I'm looking through. I do a lot of seeds, so you know what? Even these are 100-day pumpkins. This is the Jardinelles. These are good French pumpkin, and they're good for eating. I can still do those. The Cinderellas, I can still plant them. Pumpkins, and a lot of these squash will germinate in 7 to 10 days, and they're very fast growing. So if you can't find plants, don't wait, do seeds. And so moving on, so you got veggie. Oh yeah, so the cucumbers. I don't have a lot of cucumbers right now. These are lemon. This is an heirloom that's really good called lemon. You can still do cucumbers. Sometimes what I do though is, if it's really hot where you're at, I'll put these underneath or to the side of my tomatoes where my tomatoes can shade them. I'm right now, I'm actually putting them near my apple tree. My apple tree will shade them in the afternoon. So they'll get a good 5 to 6 hours of sun, but then the apple tree will shade them. So that's the lemon cucumber. If you can find the seeds, do Persian cucumbers. Another good one is just the slicers. I just brought seeds up. The Poinsett 76 is a good one. Slicer, Market Mortgage slicer. But again, with these, watch for mildew also with them. If they get mildew, I'll use like the Rose. I don't think I brought it. I think it's over there on the cart. But it's called Rose 3-in-1. It's actually a sulfur spray. So if your squash or your cucumbers start getting powdery mildew from the damp mornings, this is the same stuff. Thank you, Sabrina. This is the same stuff I use for roses. So if you see powdery mildew, that white talcum powder, in the evening, spray this. That's a good one. So it has sulfur and an organic soap in it, but it helps control the mildew. So moving on, do the cucumbers. What else do we have? And then eggplant. I don't think I brought any eggplant up. Eggplant. The main thing too right now as we get hotter, do all your melons. You know, I brought up a little color pack of watermelons. This is a big variety called Crimson Sweet. These will get about 10 to 15 pounds. Watermelons love heat as long as they get enough water. So your cantaloupe, I brought up some little, this is a good one right here called Minnesota Midget. I like them. They're littler cantaloupe, but they really do produce a lot. Like those. The other watermelon that I like the Sugar Baby. That's a good one. So Sugar Baby is a seedless icebox watermelon. So that's a good one. So plant those right now. But the main thing really when you're in this time of year, this is sort of like we're not really far into August yet, but this is the time where if you want to get a lot of the summer stuff in, get them in. Get all that stuff in now because you don't want to wait. You still got like August, September, and October to really go. Monarchs coming through but that's the main thing is don't wait. Plant them right away. You want the heat of the summer and you want the warmer weather to really have them take off. So moving on, I don't have a lot of zucchini right now, so I brought up some seeds on some of the ones that I like growing. So all the zucchini is like Black Beauty is a good one. What's that? What? Oh, printers. Thank you. Thanks for printing that. And so Black Beauty is a really good zucchini. I like that one. Romanesco is a good one. Italian heirloom. Emerald Delight. So usually I'll always I can direct sow them in the ground right now, and I'll put 2 seeds or so per cluster, and I put them farther away if I'm going to do more than one. Did I bring up some of the scallop? I thought I brought some of the scallop. Another one too, here you go. The scallop blend, which is a scallop zucchini. Well, one thing with the scallop is don't let them get too big because they get really tough. And even the regular zucchinis, pick them small when they're maybe 3 inches round by maybe 6 or 8 inches long. They're tender. Same thing with the scallops. Pick them when they're about 4 inches. If they get 5 to 6, they're going to get too big and too tough. So That's the thing with the bush zucchinis. Now moving into the other types of squash that are more the runners or the trailers. So this is a good one. This is an 8-ball, like a round 8-ball, which is like a French heirloom. So that's a good squash to grow. That's a runner. You have your kabocha, which is good. Plant those right now. All your butternut squash. This is my favorite butternut. It's called Waltham. Waltham is a good variety. That's good right now. I didn't bring any crooknecks up, but you can do crooknecks right now. But again, like I said, don't wait. Put them in the ground now and get them growing. That's important. So that's really the main thing with any is the night temperatures are warming up a little bit more. The days are really hot. You want that heat. And so that's it for the veggies. And then herbs. So herbs, going into herbs right now. So herbs are going to really take off, and I'm keening on the heat lovers. So rosemary right now, the barbecue. I love the barbecue rosemary. That's a good one to use right now. You can do the scallions or more the vegetables, but the scallions are good right now. The main thing I love is I love Mexican oregano. I use this, I pinch off a piece and I'll show you. You hold the top of it, right? Let me see. Like you hold the top of it and then you just pull it off. And then I use this in my pizzas, but I love Mexican oregano. One of my favorite oreganos for culinary. The basils are really good right now. So we're getting all the basils in. Like this is the ruffle leaf type right here. We're getting in the sweet basil. We're getting in the, this is your Thai basil. Now the biggest difference between all these basils, the sweet basil is really the only one, and the Genovese, these are the only ones you don't want them to flower. So pinch off the flowers because you don't want them to start going to seed because it slows down the plant. Now the other basils like the lemon, the Thai, all the other ones, they can flower, but mainly it's the sweet basil. So sweet basil, you don't want them to flower. Keep pinching them. And a lot of times, even when they get taller, I go back to a leaf and I pinch the top off. Then I use this on my pizzas and in my marinara sauce. So basil right now, one of my favorites though I found, I always find one variety of herbs or different things every year that will become my favorite. I love this one. It's called Emerald Towers. So Emerald Towers, I planted this in one of the containers up front in 6-inch pots that we got, and oh, it's a good variety. It's a good clove or pesto basil, because sometimes when you pick the leaves of some basils, they'll have more of like a black licorice like an anise, or there'll be more of a clove. I like to use more clove when I'm making pesto because that's a stronger type of basil. So Emerald Towers is a really good pesto basil. So even though I don't have plants, I'll still do seeds. Not too late. I'll direct seeds right in the garden. So that's with the basil. So plant them, pinch them, get them growing, water them enough. Fertilizing, not too bad with the herbs. You know, sometimes I'll fertilize when I plant them, but I only feed herbs usually once because they're not producing fruit. They're only producing leaves. So that's with the basil. And you do got to watch it for the snails and slugs. I'm going to leave the picture. I forgot all my stuff over here. And so let me grab something so I'm not going back and forth too much here. I'm going to put some of my stuff over here. And so basil is known for getting slugs. Slugs love basil. So if you start to see holes in the middle of the leaf, Sluggo Plus. Sluggo Plus is really safe to use for animals. It's just an iron phosphate. It's not a methaldehyde base, and so that's a big thing when you get into safe for animals, safe for dogs, safe for cats, because this is an iron phosphate, so when it breaks down, it just breaks down into iron, so it's not going to hurt anything. So that's with that. So moving on, so lemon verbena, these are my favorites. I love lemon verbena in green tea. Looks a little yellow, maybe it's getting too much water. Fertilize it. I feed. When anything looks yellow, fertilize it. Looks a little leggy, I'll cut it back. You want to keep this plant small because it can get tall, but love lemon verbena because it's a good substitute for lemons. So that's a good one for tea and drinks and everything. So lemon verbena I like. Lemongrass I like. Your sages, if you get into your cooking sages, always get the narrow leaf. This is the narrow leaf cooking. This is Chef's Delight. That's a good one. Chives are really good right now. I've got the garlic chives I love using. Another one that I love is I love parsley. We finally got our flat leaf parsley in. So one of my favorite varieties, and I don't know if I have it right now, I think we might be out. It's a variety of flat leaf parsley. It's called Giant of Italy. I love Giant of Italy because it will grow up tall and you'll harvest a ton off it. So that's one of my favorite parsleys. And with parsley, when you're growing it, sometimes parsley doesn't like a lot of heat or really hot areas of the garden. So again, I'll tuck it behind a tomato plant. I'll tuck it under the apple tree. Give it a little bit of afternoon shade because when we have really hot and humid afternoons, it's going to get too warm for it. So that's with the parsley. And so that's pretty much for the herbs and the tomatoes. Going over, you can still plant corn right now. If you do plant corn, plant it a foot away from each other in blocks of 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Don't plant it too close because then what happens is you don't get good pollination off the corn. So and watch for the corn worms, the corn earworms. If they're born onto the corn, you can shoot a little bit of mineral oil into the point, and they don't like mineral oils. So that's with the veggies and the herbs and all that. Moving on, flowers. So there's a lot of stuff coming in for summer. So some of the summer plants that I really start off the beginning with are these gomphrenias. Love gomphrenias. These are the taller gomphrenias. This one is carmine. This one is just cut flower red. So these are the tall ones. And you can use them for cut flowers. Full sun, a lot of water. The vinca's coming in. I do the vinca right now. All your zinnias are coming in. So zinnias, all these annuals like zinnias and some of the vinca and all that, plant it now. Now's the time to get this stuff in the garden and get it growing. Some other ones that I've pulled as I disappeared for a minute, the marigolds and the alyssum. I love French marigolds and I love alyssum. Alyssum is a good plant for the pollinators, especially the bees and the butterflies, for the nectar. The marigolds are going to help if you have a problem with tomato hornworms. Plant these at the base of your tomato, and the butterflies get confused thinking that your plant is a marigold. So what they call, anytime like with a plant that will actually insects think it's another plant, and they'll leave the plants alone. So it's sort of like a combo, or sort of like a combo plant. Anyway, moving on. So that's the annual. So plant the annuals right now. Make sure they get enough water. We are getting so many perennials in right now. So this time of year, this is perennial season. So this is for we get so many summer flowering perennials, and all of them for the hummingbirds. And I always break it into two different categories: plants that butterflies like and plants that hummingbirds like. So when you really see the butterfly plants always have an open flower where they can grab that pollen. So some of the really good ones for the butterflies you have, let me just pull a couple of them and I'll show you. So these dahlias are good. The echinaceas the purple cone flowers, the orange cone flowers, these echinaceas are really good because they'll draw the butterflies. You have the little tiny coreopsis. The coreopsis are really good, so great for the butterflies. I always like calendulas. So calendulas, everybody thinks it's more of a winter flower, but it will grow right through summer. So love all the calendulas, they're good. Nasturtiums are really good too. We're finally getting in some really good nasturtiums. This is my favorite variety. It's a series called Alaska. So Alaska is a good one. You have the pentas are going to be great, perennial, great for the butterflies, great for the bees. And then you have another one. Let me see if I can not knock everything off. You have Monardia. Now this is called bee balm or Monardia. I always thought Monardia was more of a higher elevation flower, but they're bringing it in, and so they're in bloom. So they're probably growing these down south in Fallbrook, but I've always seen them up in the mountains more. But we're seeing Monardia come in. This one is called Balmy Rose, which is a nice flower, and they bloom really good. Pretty hardy perennial too. And then the Nemesias. Nemesias are great. Love the Nemesias. They're really good for that. Great for the butterflies and the bees too. The Lantana. Now Lantana, out of all the flowers I've ever grown over the years, Lantana will take really extreme heat. I've seen Lantana grow where areas it hits way over 100 and still bloom. They use this a lot in Laughlin because it's so hot down there. Does fine, makes it through the summer, doesn't cook and still blooms. So I like a lot of the dwarf ones. I should probably recommend, like the Lucky series. Those are really good. So let me set some of these down, and then we'll go into the next one, which are are some of the hummingbird plants. So shifting gears, hummingbirds like more of the long fluted flowers. Like look at these little salvias right here. So this is hummingbird coral. They love the fluted flowers. So hummingbirds go after these because the nectar will sit in the back of the flower and they can draw that nectar out. So the hummingbird coral is really great. You have the little kufiyas. This is your little, the honeybee kufiyas. Cigar plant, they sometimes call them. More kufiyas. They key in on the little fluted flowers. All the salvias again, like this is like the Wendy's Wish or Skyscraper, that long fluted flower. Another one too that I really like, and sometimes they finish their flowers quicker, agastaches or hummingbird mint. These are great to draw in the hummingbirds. Another sort of butterfly plant, Gara. Garas are a great perennial. They'll get 3 to 4 feet tall and they'll bloom all summer long. The little Salvia greggii, autumn sage, they're really good. So they come in whites and purples and pinks. So that's a really good one to go after and use. And that's the one thing with them is pick them, plant them, and a lot of these, they really want more sun. So they're sun lovers, heat lovers. So that's important for those. And so moving on, I'll go through more of the stuff. What am I going to go through next? Let's talk a little bit about drought tolerant plants, because sometimes I don't really get into drought tolerant stuff. So right now, heat of the summer, it's very hot, we're very humid. Start planting your heat loving plants. So I like a lot of the Australian plants, Australian natives, where you go into some of the proteas are really good, like the leucodendrons. Like, I love the leucodendrons. This is a variety called Jester. Let me move this a little bit. Sorry. So Jester is a really good one. It has that pink new growth. It doesn't really flower, but it's known more for its foliage colors, so that's a good one to use. And then I didn't bring any proteas up because they're not blooming, but like your leucospermums, your regular proteas, they're great to plant right now. Not too much water. You don't want to overwater them though. A lot of people with these plants, they start watering them really heavy in summer. So with some of the drought tolerance and the cactuses and some of the drought tolerant plants, water them good when you water them, but don't keep them constantly wet. That's really important. Like I see people plant these and they'll put them on the sprinkler every day, like for 8 or 10 minutes. No, I'll probably go on once a week, maybe twice, but don't keep them too wet. Some other plants that I like too, I didn't bring a lot up, but the rice flower, the Ozyothamnus, I love using these. They're very, very drought tolerant. It's an interesting plant because it wants to grow real tall, like about 6 feet, but not real wide, about 3 feet tall. So that's another good drought tolerant. Another one that I like for foliage color, I love these little Comprosmas. So these little Comprosmas are really good. This is Pina Colada. They're great for foliage color, and the one thing with these, they like a lot of heat, like a lot of sun, but they don't like a lot of water. So that's another thing. Always moderate in terms of your water, moderation with your water, not too wet. And then with that, there's so many other drought tolerant plants. I didn't really bring them up, but if you have questions about a lot of the drought tolerant plants, come in and I can show you all, because now we've really got a lot of them now that we're into summer. So moving on from the drought tolerant plants, I want to talk a little bit about roses. Here, I'm going to clear some of the stuff off this table, and I'm going to actually bring up a rose, and I just want to talk a little bit about rose maintenance this time of year. So roses have really been blooming all summer long. Let me clear this. Let me move some of this stuff off. Can you see me? Can you? Okay, so roses. Roses really are long bloomers. Roses will start as early as March and April, but usually as we go into August, we've had a longer blooming season this year because we've been cool, but as we go more into this month, they'll start slowing down a little bit. So it's a good time to start cleaning them up. I will light trim them back. I don't hard prune this time of year. So even like with this cluster, this is a really nice rose. This is this is called Huntington 100. So this is another name of it is called Life of the Party. So this is the rose that was a memorial for the Huntington Botanical Garden near Pasadena. So this was the rose, and it's a really neat little rose. It's more of a floribunda, but see, even like when this flower cluster is pretty well done and they're starting to drop, if I touch them and they're falling off, I'll just take my pruners. I don't prune really hard with them, but I will go down to about 3 to 4 sets of leaves down, and I'll cut all of those flowers. And then if there's old ones, I'll sort of light cut around the new ones, like see if I can cut some of the ones and let these go. And then I always sort of clean them up, and then if I see any other little flowers that are done. But that's the main thing with roses, and let me turn you around. See, these are already done. So when I'm cutting, what I always do is I'll go through and I'll fertilize them afterward, because once I cut them back completely, or I'm not cutting them hard, but just light cleaning them up, they'll start blooming again as we get closer into fall. So clean them up right now, get them ready for the next bloom, because they're going to start slowing down right now because we're just too hot, 75 to 85 degrees, 80% humidity. The flowers won't last as long when it's this hot. So clean them up, cut them. And what I usually do, let me set these over here. I like this is my favorite fertilizer for the roses, and I use this on every perennial. It's just the down-to-earth rose fertilizer. But what I always do differently is I use extra Epsom salts with roses. So at least twice a year, early spring and summer, I'll use about a half a handful of Epsom salts, and I'll put it down first. I'll put the rose fertilizer down about one handful. I'll work it in, and I'll water really good afterward, because Epsom salts has a good source of magnesium. It's magnesium sulfate. That's very important for roses, because roses will branch more when they get enough magnesium. Very important mineral. They will help them. They'll shoot basal breaks, and basal breaks are branching from the sides. It will help them branch more. So sometimes when people say, "Well, it will help the roses flower more," and they're like, "But I don't see more flowers." But what we'll do is it will help create more branches that will help flower more off those branches. So use your Epsom salts at least twice a year with your fertilizer, and definitely now is the time to sort of clean them up and watch for them to finish off some of their flowers. And that's with roses. So, and then like I was saying earlier, if you have a problem with mildew or with rust or any of that, you want to use the sulfur spray again. So back to the 3-in-1. This is a good one, but don't use it during the heat of the day. Use it in the evening when it's cooler, especially if you see the orange powder, which is rust. It's going to work its way up from the ground. Strip all those old leaves, spray the cane, spray the ground, and keep rust from really taking off. And always water the ground. Even when you're watering, with the other fungus, powdery mildew, it can thrive off of moisture and dampness. And so what you don't want to do is you don't want to keep the leaves really wet at night, because then you're really looking at prolonging some of those funguses, like even black spot and rust and mildew. It will take off if you keep the soil too wet or keep the leaves too wet. So always water the ground, mulch really good. I'll talk about mulching and watering closer to the end, but definitely spray and trim and just keep them growing. Get them ready for fall, because that's going to be your next big wave of flowers. Okay, so that's that. And so I pretty much talked about a lot of the hummingbird and butterfly, but I'm going to talk a little bit about the natives. And so I'm going to pull this apart. Let me move this, and then before I end it, I'll talk about watering, mulching, and about the vegetables. So right now you can still plant some of the California natives. There's some varieties of natives that really do better when you plant them in the winter, coinciding when the winter rains. But I always find that a lot of the flowering plants do fine if you plant them in right now. Like some plants, like Matilaha poppies, and some of like the woolly blue curls, like the trichostemias and all those, they do better when you plant them in November, December. So they don't, and even some of the manzanitas do better when you plant them in the winter around that time. But I always find that the flowering California natives do fine when you plant them right now. So you have one that's a good one, that's a little yarrow. This is your little millefolium. So this is by a really good grower up in the Central Coast called Native Sons. I love this. You can actually use this as a lawn alternative. So I love that the little yarrow, millefolium, that's your really low one. There's taller varieties too. Like this is just your apple blossom. These are going to get taller, but apple blossom is good to plant right now. And then you go into the one of my favorites that's native to parts of Baja is Verbena de la Mina. These are great to put in right now. Love the heat. Another favorite one that I always see when I hike up in the Central Coast in Morro Bay, I love the monkey flowers. The monkey flowers are so great. So monkey flowers are really good. They call them sticky monkey flowers because the leaves have a little stickiness to them, but they're really good. Very drought tolerant. Don't water these too much, because I know a lot of people tend to overwater them, but moderate, very moderate with the water, not too much. And there was a gold one too, but I don't think I brought it up. But love the monkey flowers. The monkey flowers are good. And then going into, you can still do ceanothus. Ceanothus is a good one. Ceanothus is a great one. I like using those. A lot of the ones I like is in the family of ceanothus. I like the ground cover ones like caramel creeper. It's Ceanothus gracilius, and they're the ones that go really wide, and they can take a lot of heat. Like I was out in an area of Tustin last week. Oh, they were growing like great hot weather. You know, the Artemisias are good too. So this looks like David's Choice. Yeah, this is David's Choice, which is a good. There's Artemisia californica. This is David's Choice. Good for adding grain to the garden. Not much water. Keep them a little on the dry side. And then other plants. These aren't really natives, but again, you can still put them in with the natives, like all the Salvia microphyllus. The little microphyllus are good. You have more of the white Greggii. And one of the ones that really is one of the that's becoming one of the top natives is the one that they use for monarchs. See the caterpillars on this? They're going to town on this. This is your narrow leaf milkweed, so Schlepsius fascicularis. And fascicularis has a wide range where it grows in California. And so it will grow all the way from up north to the coastal areas to farther inland into Nevada, all the way down into Baja. So there's a lot of caterpillars. There's 3 of them on here. So this is your monarch. You know, they use this as a host plant. So they feed off this. I know they'll feed really quick. Plant more of them. And what you want to do with this plant, since it does shoot new growth from the crown, or it shoots new shoots off the crown, when you go into late fall, which is around October, cut them back to the ground, you know, and then these guys will be long gone, but the little pupas, these are the milkweeds. See, they're hanging in there pretty good, you know. So, okay, and so, but we have a lot of them in stock right now. We just got a new shipment, and yeah, so nice little 1 gallon narrowleaf. There's another milkweed that they grow more up north that we get sometimes called the showy milkweed, but I haven't seen those yet. But I just got in a couple hundred of the narrowleaf, so we're stocked on those. And so some other plants that I really like, you have the penstemons. Penstemons are great for hummingbirds too. There's more penstemons, and so that's it with the natives. Let's go through, and I'm going to talk a little bit about fruit trees really quick. So fruit trees right now. You can still plant your apples, peaches, nectarines, all that. Put them in right now, it's fine. Even though it's hotter, everybody says it's too hot to plant. If you're on the coast, you're fine. If it's hotter where you're at, you might wait till fall. Still planting citrus and avocados right now. We're in a quarantine, so we're not selling citrus right now, but it's a great time to plant them. All my citrus are really coming alive right now because the heat. Citrus love heat. They don't like to be really wet, and they like fertilizing. So when you're going through your citrus right now, you're really going through, feed them every couple months with the down-to-earth citrus food, because this has your minerals in it. So it has your nitrogen 6, phosphorus 3, potassium 3, but when you look on the back, it has your calcium, which is good for your fruit, but it's sulfur, iron, zinc, and magnesium. So 3 good minerals that they really need. So that's important. Feed them. And the one thing with citrus, you can grow them in pots, you can grow them in the ground, but try not to overwater them. So if the leaves ever start turning really yellow, fertilize them really good. Water them good. Wait about 2 weeks before you water them again. Don't keep them overly wet, because that's where people fail with citrus, and they say they're not growing. Don't overwater them. And avocados are the same way. Water them good, let them gradually dry out. Water them good, gradually. And if you have to, you can buy one of those little moisture meters and stick it down 6 inches. And if it's reading wet, wait a week to 2 before you water again. So don't overwater the citrus. That's a key thing. Another thing that I do with them is I like the compost teas. So I make a lot of my own compost tea. I'll use the Malibu. I'll use anything. This looks like a tea bag, and so I'll steep that in water. And then I'll water it in every 2-3 weeks with the citrus. And another thing that I'm getting a lot of requests, when citrus are carrying a lot of fruit, don't fertilize them. So that's a big thing, because if you start feeding them too much when they're carrying a lot of fruit, the nitrogen is too much for them, and it can get them to drop that fruit. So you always want to fertilize them up until when they really start setting. So feeding is really to get them to go all the way to when they really start flowering. Once they set that fruit, But another thing that I do is when citrus trees are younger, 5 years or younger, I feed really heavy because they're not fruiting that much yet. So usually it takes them about 4 years to really start fruiting. Then I'll feed them early in the spring, and then summer when they're carrying a lot of fruit, I won't feed them. I won't feed them because I don't want them to drop that fruit. So that's with citrus. With all of your fruit trees, another thing that I like to stress on too is this time of year, this tree is just getting long whips. So apricots will do it, peaches will do it. I'm not really pruning the tree, but I'm taking these whips back to keep it smaller. Like I always like to go to Dave Wilson Nursery is one of the biggest bare root fruit tree growers in the United States, and a lot of the trees that you buy and then you grow are from Dave Wilson. So I went to one of their seminars recently, a couple months ago, and one of the guys was like, somebody asked him how do you keep how do you keep a fruit tree a dwarf? And he goes, pruners. And so that's one thing a lot of growers do is they won't let them get 10 to 15 feet to harvest them. You can keep them small, but when they get these long whips, apricots will do it, peaches will do it. This is a plum. I'll just literally go through and I'll take it down by about half. I'm always going to an outward facing branch. So I can take this one and literally just go through. Now, this isn't a winter pruning, so I'm just really light shaping some of the growth. So what I'm doing with that is I'm taking all these long whips and then I'm actually going to turn it into a dwarf. And so light trim all the way around the tree. Even like with this one, I don't know if you can see this one. I'll go outward facing. Maybe I'll trim this one again. That's how you dwarf a tree. Late summer, and even most of the time, like this is a beauty plum. Most of this would be actually still ripening out its fruit. So I might actually prune a plum more into after it's done fruiting in September. But peach, apricots, nectarines, you want to prune them now because they're done fruiting. So don't feel afraid to take some of those whips down. So then the plant, you keep it as a dwarf or you keep it smaller. So that's important with fruit trees, on keeping them more to manageable size in your yard and to make sure that you can reach them and harvest them too. Switching gears now with some of the berries, you can still plant blueberries, but blueberries, I like to put them in a container because blueberries have a hard time in the ground. They like a lot of water and they like it well drained. So get a medium-sized container, like a 17, 18 inch. I do something different. They always push acid planting mix. I don't plant them in acid planting mix. It stays too wet and will rot them out. So what I do is I'll take the Malibu potting soil. I might add a little bit more pumice to it. I'll plant them in that, and I do keep them acidic. So I'll feed them with an acid fertilizer. My favorite thing to do with blueberries is give them coffee grounds and fertilize them with cottonseed meal. That's important. And so how much time do we have left, Sabrina?
Probably about like 3 minutes or so.
Okay, so I'm going to talk really bit about mulching. Another thing that right now too, plant all your tropical stuff. We're getting in plumerias, we're getting in hibiscus, we're getting in some of the jasmine. So as we go into summer, this is your tropical time. So talking about watering. So a lot of people always ask me, what about watering and how long should I water? The one thing as we go through hot weather, you want to make sure that you water really early. A lot of people like to water late, but I water early or late. So even like with vegetable gardens, I'll get out there sometimes 6 in the morning. I'll water really good. If I have to water in the evening, I'll water the ground. I don't wet the leaves. And so I do that a lot when I get home from work at 7 o'clock at night. I'll water the ground. I like to use, I'm getting away from the really, the collapsible hoses because they don't work as much. So there's some stuff that I've been using that I really like. So I like these Flexzillas. This is just a lightweight hose, but it's a good hose. I mean, it doesn't kink up on me. So this is a good one. I haven't bought one yet, but one of my customers bought one, and I've been watering her tomatoes while she's on vacation. This is a good one. They have lead-free. This is a big thing, is they have lead-free fittings. Drinking water safe. So that's another thing to watch for when you buy a hose, especially if you're watering your vegetable garden or if you're drinking out of the hose. Water safe fittings. So that's a good one, 50 to 75. I like the watering ones, I like these because they have just like the 800 water breaker, but I like an easy shut off. See, this has a thumb shut off, so this is a good one. I like using these. One of my favorite, let me see where I put it. I'm always searching for stuff. Oh, like there it is. This is really good because this has 1,000 holes, and so this is a very soft watering nozzle. So this is your dram. 1,000, that's one of my favorites. So when you water, it's better to water really thoroughly. A lot of people water too frequently and not long enough. You do gotta take in consideration what kind of soil you have. You know, sometimes if you water too long with clay, you're gonna get in trouble because that clay is gonna want to hold all that water. If it's sandy soil, sometimes you gotta water a little longer for it to percolate. So remember, when you do water with the sandy soil, you want to water a little longer because you got to get that water through. With heavy clay, you got to watch out. You probably don't want to water as long. So, and even with drip irrigation, with drip, I see people go too long. There's a couple things with drip. They don't go long enough, or they do too many times a week. Drip is very slow. Drip is gallons per hour. So you might be watering twice a week with drip for maybe 20, 30 minutes, maybe 40 if you're hot and you're sandy. A lot of people will get in there and they'll be watering 4 or 5 times a week on drip. It's like, no, that's too much water. So don't water drip. Drip's efficient, puts the water on the ground. Sprays, I usually go about twice a week for about 4 to 8 minutes. But you got to try it and make sure that if you're getting into like wanting to save water, there's a little sprinkler head that we used to carry by Hunter sprinklers called MP rotators. I love MP rotators because the older sprinkler heads would put out 3 to 4 gallons per minute. MP rotators will put out a half a gallon to a gallon per minute. Very effective in the hotter areas, and especially if you're in a windy area. So that's important with water, but definitely look into how frequent. Don't go too frequently. Like a long time ago when I lived in Las Vegas, I had to water my lawn every day because I was in an area that hit 100, 508. I see people watering every day on the coast. I'm like, why? You don't need to be watering that frequently because your evaporation or your EV, your transpiration isn't as high. So that's another thing you got to really watch for when you think that you're overwatering. If the water department's coming after you, it's like, look at the frequency, because sometimes here on the coast, you should be fine at once a week, twice a week, maybe 3 at the most, but usually in the summers in this area, twice a week usually is more than enough. And another topic that I want to touch on when watering is mulching. So I love to use, let me move some of this. I love mulching. Mulching is my favorite. So one of my favorite mulches, I like shredded cedar bark. Shredded redwood, really good. Lets the water get through, retains the water. I do like to put mulch pretty thick, about 1 to 2 inches, even as much as 3. Keep the mulch away from the trunk, especially your roses. Don't want to rot them out. Another one that, let's see if I can grab it. Another one that I like, let me see if I can pick it up. This one's heavy. I'm like hitting the microphone. If you can see me. If you can see me, the microphone's in my face. This is like the little mini mulch. I love the mini mulch because the mini mulch, the water flows through it really good and you can walk on it. So this is good if you have to walk on it, but I love the mini mulch. I'm not as big of a fan of the big chunky mulches because they deflect the water and sometimes they're hard to walk on. So I like the mulches. Now, if you're in an area that's restricting mulches, if you're in an area that's a fire zone, or if you've had a problem where they say you can't mulch near your house, you can't mulch, what you can do as an alternative, do your composts. Another thing to help retain water, you can do, like I just ripped the bag, that was good. This thing's heavy. It's nice and wet because it holds all that water. The Harvest Supreme is a good mulch. It's high in chicken manure. It will help build the soil in your garden, and helps retain the water. And they can't get after you because it's a compost. Mulches tend to be dry shredded bark. Well, the compost is composted bark. And another one that I like, that I use, and I'm going to get really close, and I don't want to scare you guys. It's like, they're making these bags heavier. The Malibu compost is a good one too because you're going to mulch with it lightly, maybe a half an inch to an inch, and that will help retain the water. And I do earthworm castings too. So mulching, if you're mulching with your shredded cedar, shredded redwood, and your mini mulch, that's fine. But if you're in a fire zone, look at the compost. So that's another one. So that pretty much wraps it up for today. Now it's the question and answer. So what do you guys ask me?
Yeah. There's no questions as of right now.
Come on, there must be one question.
I know. Let me look through a little earlier. It was, I believe, about the mulch for tomatoes. Let me go toward the beginning. Okay. Yeah, I can't quite find it right now, but I believe just the mulch for tomatoes.
If you had a question, mulching tomato plants, I do mulch my tomato plants, and especially this time of year when we're hitting in the where I'm at, it's going to be in the high 80s, low 90s. I like mulching with alfalfa straw, and sometimes I mulch with grass clippings, but I use drip irrigation. So if you're using more sprinklers or watering by hand, then I would do like a shredded redwood. You put down your compost too. Like if I do use a lot of wood products in my garden, they take longer to break down and they can draw nitrogen out of your garden. So the best thing, if you do decide to use like a chipped redwood or shredded cedar, just put down some Malibu and some worm castings underneath it, work it in, and then mulch over it, and that's fine. But I do like alfalfa straw a little bit for mulching because it sort of is like more wiry and the water goes through it better, you know. But yeah, I've used Timothy grass and grass clippings, but that usually works better because my drip irrigation's underneath it. But if I'm watering overhead or sprinklers, I tend to use alfalfa or shredded so the water can move through it, you know.
Okay, perfect. And we do have to kind of cut the live right now, but I would recommend commenting your questions when we post the live, and that way we can get back to you too, or even call in and ask for David as well.
Yeah, if you guys have any questions, thank you for joining me today. Any questions, you can follow us on social media, you can follow us on Facebook, come into the nursery and ask us, because I'm always around. I'm always in the nursery. Okay, thank you guys.
Thank
Bye.
you.
See ya. Happy gardening.